Alright, good evening, good morning, depending on the time you watch this, but it's evening, my time. And I wanted to make a relatively short weekly outlook update on the majors. Well, I don't really have much to say on the yens, but we'll try and go over them quickly. So let's start with actually also gold as well, but let's start with the dollar index. On the dollar index, I mentioned, if you remembered, I mentioned that I wanted to see the monthly opening price tagged using the IPTA data range. For those that remember the previous weekly outlook video, I was saying that I was looking for at least the EQ line to be tagged. I'll probably put a snippet of that right now. Consolidated the whole month, so I'm looking to see if this month will be the one to push us higher. I do expect price to tap the EQ level, the opening price of this month, before continuing higher though. That would be my optimum entry for us to retrace all the way down to the EQ, which is the equilibrium or the opening price of the month before continuing. So yeah, now that we finally tagged that EQ line and actually traded below into the discounted price, into this last down close candle before the expansion to the upside, making this a bullish order block. Well, it's not technically a high probability order block to me, but it shows that the price is still respecting higher prices. And secondly, the second condition that I was looking for to be met is that we stayed above this inversion fair value gap. You can see how price couldn't even close below the inversion, not even to talk about this massive buy side imbalance from NFP. So seeing this rejection after CPI and after PPI gives me the confidence that we are likely going to come for these relative equal highs over here. Let's label them as our equal highs. We have these relative equal highs as a very short-term target, and then going through that we have the 20 days high, going through that we have the 40 days high. And next week or in a couple of days, this down close candle, this massive CPI candle, can become a future bullish order block. So that's something that I'm watching out for. It would be nice to see price close above this down close candle. So if we close above it and also above this swing high right here, that will be a double confirmation for me. If we close above this order block and this swing high, I could look for possibility of price returning down to the order block and continue buying the dollar to the upside. So something like so. And personally, I was looking for a setup on euro dollar because it was the weaker out of the two currencies within this inversion gap. So the time was still inside of this inversion fair value gap on the euro. I was looking for a possible setup, and you'll see my alert actually, not this. Let's remove this also. So on euro dollar, we tapped into a daily fair value gap. I think I also covered this as well, that we could potentially see price trade up into a premium area. I even said that we could reach the order block, but we traded up into this premium fair value gap, right, the CB in this case. And I was looking for a 1 hour confirmation on the 1 hour chart right there on Wednesday afternoon. We displaced below a swing low, giving me a confirmed market structure shift. So when we close below this swing low, price gives me the confidence to look for sells. So we traded into Asia. This was the entirety of Asia session range, and this was PPI. I was expecting price to remain consolidative until PPI so that we can trade up into this 1 hour bearish fair value gap. This was going to be where I sold from. And you can see my alert was still there. I wanted to see price could trade up into that before selling it off, but of course price didn't do that. It did something I personally wouldn't have taken anyway. We swept this liquidity here. We can agree to that we swept liquidity there. We didn't tap into a high time frame PDRA, right? But we swept liquidity there. We displaced below, creating this order block, high probability order block, right? This last bullish candle before the move down, because this last bullish candle swept liquidity, but it didn't tap into a PDRA. That's the only thing I wouldn't consider this order block for. But the fact that we swept liquidity gave me the confidence to take it as an order block. When PPI came along, we can see we traded up into it, but we traded so far into it that we actually made relative equal highs with this swing high. Let's actually check what the exact number is. When we look up there at the high, the H number, we can see this high is 1.08164 and the PPI high is 1.08163. So literally a point apart that spreads would have definitely taken you out if you had entered from this order block. So yeah, this was not nice. I didn't take it. I didn't even bother trying to risk selling this. And yeah, I was actually waiting for this fair value gap, but I never got that. So what I'm looking for now is just a continuation. If price keeps this swing low without taking the previous day low, which is technically today, but if price keeps this swing low, you could possibly measure the range from the PPI high all the way to the swing low. It doesn't have to come all the way up here to OTE. We can just look for the premium side of the range, and we can see the premium side is over here. So moving forward, to today, I would like to see if price can trade up into this order block now that we've created. This order block did not sweep liquidity. It actually came shy of sweeping liquidity, but we swept many internal liquidity levels there, and it's coupled with a fair value gap. So I would like to see if there's a potential move to the upside into premium. Anything above this blue line is a premium, by the way. So I'll look for a possible move into the upside, possibly to this order block, right? It already has a fair value gap here, so this would be a nice order block to look for sales from, right? But if we don't get this today, if we don't get this going into Friday, that's also fine, because we have a possible setup for next week. Let me set the alert for this over there. We have a possible setup for next week. Well, the same with the dollar index, but the opposite, of course. We have rejected from a daily PDRA, creating a possible bearish order block. So if price can close below that, this bullish candle and this swing low, then it would make sense to look for selling opportunities anywhere from here, taking it down to complete this market maker sell model. Finally, we've come out of this massive consolidative move. Look how price was struggling to move up. We barely created a daily inefficiency for price to actually be able to use to move up. And then the times we do create an inefficiency, this was the price action we got. We would disrespect it, re-respect it, disrespect it, re-respect it. So now, after NFP has happened for this month, it actually looks a lot more cleaner. The ranges are looking wider, so we might actually get a clean market maker sell model distributing the sell phase of the move down. So I'm looking out for this. I'm looking out for next week, and we could possibly see a clean price action to that sell side liquidity level. So this is something to keep an eye out on, and that's all I really have for the majors. Inside of this daily fair value gap, I don't know if I mentioned in the last video, but we have an SMT divergence as well with GU, which was what was making me want to sell it. I mean, you can see how GU has swept the highs. We swept the highs there, while EU has failed to sweep those highs, drastically failed. So this was showing me that the euro was the weaker one, and we also have a PDRA, SMT inside of a PDRA, go into a lower time frame and look for internal range liquidity to external range liquidity. That's literally the model that I trade. So yeah, this was an A+ setup for me, but we just never got the entry. I never got the entry I wanted. Of course, when you go down to the 15 minutes chart, there was a very clear entry that most people capitalized on that I missed. Noticing the same market structure shift when we closed below it over there. Actually, even here, we can see the price displays lower, closing below that swing low right there. When price retraced up, this was a low risk entry because you would have placed your stop loss here for a potential run to those sell side liquidity levels. So this risk compared to this reward is massive enough that this is worth giving it a try. So yeah, on the 15 minutes chart we had a lot of entries. Even when we closed below, we still had entries. Of course, we had Asia session play out here. When price came and swept Asia session high, that could have been another entry. So yeah, 15 minutes, you probably would have, even 5 minutes, the same thing. But I was not watching it from the 5 minutes or 15 minutes. I was watching from the lower time frame, using time frame alignment from daily to 1 hour. So that's how I missed it. But I'm watching out for this now, today, Friday, and of course I'll be watching it for next week as well. Going to the yen, which we have very important news tonight actually. During this Asia session before midnight, I think. I'm not really sure how it's going to work, but I think it actually bleeds into the next day, which is Friday. I think you all know that I'm looking for an internal range liquidity to external range liquidity play on the yen. On the yen crosses, we can see we tapped into this fair value gap from the weekly perspective. So I was expecting internal back to external. So internal range liquidity, which is a fair value gap, back to external range liquidity, which is a sell side liquidity in this specific example. So I'm looking for these lows to be ran this night, this session. On the daily chart, we've been bearish as well. Price hasn't been holding up during the whole move, and my top watch was AUDJPY. Of course, in the previous video when I did my weekly outlook, I was covering all yen. I was running through all yen crosses quickly, but my top watch was AUDJPY, so because we had the same thing on the weekly chart. Fair value gap, internal to external. In this case, it's fair value gap to buy side liquidity. So I'm looking for this play to happen. So looking at the weekly chart, we see this on the 4-hour chart, which is the time frame to align with this idea. We see that price traded into that weekly fair value gap. This massive purple area is the weekly fair value gap. Price came down into discount. That's why we see the 0 to 1 there. Anything below the 50% is discount. Price came down to discount, tapping into the order block and the fair value gap down there. Price tapped into the order block and fair value gap all the way down there, pushed away, created a new BC and inversed this CB. So we got an inversion fair value gap with a bullish fair value gap. I did not enter in this one. I waited for a second fair value gap to be formed. Fortunately, we created a second one there with a bullish order block as well. So I got in on this one, on this bullish order block with the fair value gap, and price has been supporting higher, has been pushing higher since then with this bullish order block as well. With this place higher, we created a fair value gap. This happened during PPI or around PPI. We came down all the way, even though we're so close to sweeping the highs, creating relative equal highs in this area, relative equal highs that probably retail traders are seeing this as a strong resistance area to push price lower. Probably even SMC and ICT traders are probably looking at this as a typical 2022 model, a sweep of the highs, a displacement below, market structure shift, and fair value gap. Probably many of them are looking to sell right now, but me personally, I'm looking at a high time frame. I'm looking at a time frame higher than even the 4-hour, which is the weekly. So I am taking this whole move to the downside as a manipulation into a PDRA for a continuation. I'm not buying that this is an actual change in the state of delivery. So I'm hoping to see price continue higher. On the 1-hour chart, even though it has nothing to do with time frame alignment necessarily, on the 1-hour chart we can see the sweep happen, and we created a fair value gap down there with a bullish order block. So far price has been respecting that order block. We do have this very insane news coming up soon. that I'm not even sure of the time, because they don't give the time, they just write tentative. I don't really know what that means, but yeah, I'll probably put some here on the screen. But yeah, we don't know when the news is coming, and I'm looking to see now that this order block has been respected. It's a high probability one because we swept liquidity into a PD array, as we highlighted from a high time frame, and now we are creating a fair value gap. So I'm expecting this swing low to hold. I don't want to see price breach this low. We have now created an intermediate swing low or an intermediate low. I'm looking to see if there is a possibility of a 1 hour fair value gap being created here as well. Price could dip down into that 1 hour gap and inverse this massive CB, because once this massive CB has been inversed, has been disrespected, it also cancels out those ICT traders that are looking to sell this as well, because it's been violated. So once this has been inverted, it will be a good place to look for more buying opportunities. So if you're looking for buys, I would say probably wait for this fair value gap or wait for this to be inversed before looking for longs. The thing is, the news that is highly anticipated, because I believe the Bank of Japan is making interest rate decisions. So yeah, that really affects the yen a lot. That's the random price movements we get in the yen. So yeah, personally, I'm expecting it to just run straight up to the buy side without pushing lower or meandering around. But of course, anything is possible, anything can happen, and I'm open to that. So this is what I'm expecting on AJ. Let's move on and finalize with gold and silver. Well, only gold, because silver is still looking choppy at the moment. Let's see if we can get a cleaner chart. This is not a signal, I'm not saying anything, it's just random things on my chart. So let's just move on to a clean chart. On the daily time frame, we have now rejected from the area that I was paying attention to. If you remember in my previous video, again, if you don't, I'm probably gonna put a snippet now here. Measuring the range, we can see that we're already in discount right now, but if you measure the main range from the low down there, we have discounted price here, right? So we could look for this down close candle to be the next target and possibly the swing low after it. So we have so many sell side liquidity levels to be aiming for, and at that point this would also be a breaker that we could retrace back into before continuing lower, of course. So price came to these equal body lows inside of this fair value gap. We traded above the premium side of the fair value gap. For those that don't know where the premium is, let's put the halfway mark. That's the halfway mark. We traded up into the premium of the fair value gap, and now closed yesterday below the previous candle low, creating a swing high like so, and CPI high of week so far. This makes me feel that this now becomes an order block for possible lower prices. For those that remember, I am still aiming for that swing low, because if price, as I mentioned in the last video, if price does trade below that swing low and closes below it as well from the weekly perspective, I showed you how this could be a typical 2022 model from ICT, a sweep of the highs, a market structure shift waiting to happen here. If price can close below this swing low, this becomes a breaker. This last candle becomes a breaker that price could trade back into and continue lower to multiple sell side liquidities. So yeah, this was my expectation. This is my expectation on gold. But of course, this will be better supported with higher dollar, and if they are actually in sync, because we know that gold, silver, and the dollar index, especially with the indices as well, are completely out of sync. Right now, they just decide to correlate whenever they decide to correlate. But most of the time, they are completely out of sync. So yeah, I'm waiting to see what happens today, this new daily candle, and I'm waiting to see what happens this week as the weekly candle closes as well. But my expectations and my directional bias is lower on gold, and I think the high of week has already been set on Wednesday. So So yeah, that's all I have for now. If you have any questions, inputs, suggestions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me in the comment section below. For now, stay safe, good luck, and good trading.